Hello again, and welcome to this interview in the series that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to use the power of food to boost our energy, get the body we love, and get back that zest for life that we all crave. Today, we are interviewing Fouad Kassab, who is a chef, food writer, and co-host of the podcast A Quirky Journey, and alongside Jo Whitten has authored the truly beautiful cookbook, Life Changing Food. It has pride of place in my kitchen, Fouad. I love it.
Thank you. We love it too. Thank you for supporting us by having one.
It is just a wonderful book. Beautiful. So let's introduce everybody to who you are, Fouad. Can you give us a little bit of a story of your background, where you come from and how you came to be doing the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 38 years in the making, so it's a bit of a long story to put in one short conversation. But I was born in Lebanon during the Civil War. And during that time, Lebanon was receiving international aid from all these countries that were supporting the Lebanese people to survive during that time. So I grew up on a diet that was mainly white flour, white sugar, vegetable oils. There was a lot of medication because they were worried about a person going to hospital. Hospitals were being bombed at the time.
Yes.
So there was a lot of stress and lots of medication and lots of refined foods. And now we know that these things are really like the three cornerstones of disease, chronic illness. And for me, it started manifesting from really early on. So I was an obese child. And when I turned 13, I started getting recurring ear infections that were really seriously painful. And I had to go on antibiotic injections for 3 years on and off. And when I turned 17, I started getting acne that started off on my head, then moved throughout the rest of my body, my chest, my arms, my legs, my back. So the doctors gave me more and more antibiotics. So I was on antibiotics yearly to manage that, sometimes several times a year. And came to Australia in 2001. I was doing a degree in English literature there just to avoid military service, really. But later on affected my writing career.
Yeah.
So in 2001, I came and studied software engineering in Sydney. And I saw the doctors here, hoping that they would know a little bit better as to why I am the way I am. Mm-hmm. They kept giving me more antibiotics. And for the acne, I was using benzoyl peroxide and all these antibacterial washes to keep the acne under control, and also taking the antibiotics. In a couple of years from there, I developed systemic eczema on top of the acne as well. So I was overweight. I was putting steroid creams, benzoyl peroxide washes, and taking antibiotics. That was sort of my life. And to control the weight, I was every year going on some kind of fad diet, trying to lose the weight. And mostly it was the most successful stuff was calorie restriction. And I would eat very, very little food. And I would exercise as hard as I could, because people tell you that when you're overweight, that you're too lazy, that you eat too much and you don't move enough. So it becomes an emotional thing as well, and a body image issue and a self-image issue. So the self-esteem gets affected, the emotions get affected as well. And here I am taking a cocktail of medications topically and internally, and trying to deal with the weight issue while having a career as an IT guy. I was working in a stressful job at one of the major banks. And at the same time, I had started a blog in 2006 called The Food Blog. And that was the first Middle Eastern food blog in the world, as far as I know.
Wow.
And it was one of the earliest in Sydney. I think, we were just a handful back then. I even got the name, the domain name, thefoodblog.com.au. So that goes to show you how early on that was. Within a couple of years from that, the Sydney Morning Herald invited me to review restaurants for the Good Food Guide. So I was, around 2008, I think, I started reviewing for them. So I had this career as an IT guy. I was traveling around New South Wales, eating all these restaurants and writing critically around food. And at the same time, my health was deteriorating, and I was still on that yo-yo dieting cycle.
Yeah.
And it was 2010 when my first daughter was born. 2011, she was a year old, and I was 128 kilos. Now, when she was born, I had my skin was infected. I had acne everywhere, and I was super worried even to hold her. So I was washing myself with antibacterial washes and creams on. And in 2011, at 128 kilos, I was struggling to tie my shoelaces, struggling to get out of a chair, and I thought, I really need to make a big change in my life. I didn't know what. I went to the doctor at the time. He was a specialist I'd been waiting to see for my skin. I'd been waiting for 5-6 months. Went to see this guy. He looked at my skin, panicked, started authorizing a high-strength antibiotic for me. And he asked me no questions as to my history. All he did was looked at my skin, didn't look at the obvious issue of my weight, didn't address that. I asked him if there's anything I can do to at least control these symptoms, and he said, hey, you're born this way, this is just your luck, and there's nothing you can do about it. All you can do is continue to medicate to manage your symptoms. That was literally what he said to me. So that was crushing for me, walking out yet again with another antibiotic script and another topical steroid cream script. And I decided that if I can't do anything about my skin, at least I know I can lose a little bit of weight by starving myself. And my job was causing me an incredible amount of stress. And I talked to my wife, I said, look, I want to have a few months off work in order to get my health on track. And I'm just really struggling with where I'm at the moment. And my wife agreed, and I submitted my resignation, and I came across an article I think that day or the day after, by a science writer called Gary Toles. He had written in the New York Times an article called "Is Sugar Toxic?" And he was talking about the toxicity of sugar and how we have a very simplistic view of calories and macronutrients and saying a calorie is a calorie. And he was saying that people put on weight not through calories. The body is not a calorie counter. The body is a living organism, and it controls its systems through hormones. And insulin seems to be the hormone that it's suggested through observing the body that the insulin is what controls weight gain and weight loss, because you have type 1 diabetics who they can't produce insulin, and they can eat as much food as they want, but they can't put on any weight. And the second you start injecting insulin into their body, they start partitioning weight. And it seems to be responsible for the pathway that makes a human being put on weight. And he talked about a low-carb diet at the time, and he was saying, this is pretty much what, you can do if you want to lose weight. And I bought his book. I think it was called something like Why We Get Fat and What We Can Do About It. And I was in complete disbelief, because I thought I knew, because previously I'd lost weight by calorie restriction. So I thought, hey, I knew why I was overweight. I just eat too much and I exercise too little. And I need to change that, but I always seem to fail at it. But he was saying it's the reason why you lose weight during calorie restriction isn't because you're restricting calories, but because you're restricting carbohydrates, which spike insulin. So a low-carb diet is what's possibly responsible. And he's very careful about wording things. He says we need more science to prove this. The science is just not being done because we're stuck in an old paradigm, and we need new ways of thinking now, because the old way of thinking has gotten us into a very bad place, and we can't continue to give people the same advice again, because it's failing everyone, and you can look around, pretty much see that is the case. I was worried a lot about saturated fat and things like that, and taking in the amounts of fat that he was talking about, because when you remove carbs, you can't really eat too much protein self-limits, really. Like if you have a lot of protein, you'll know that you can't eat too much of it. But the carbs you can overeat, and fat you can eat a lot of as well. So he was saying eat a lot of fat, make that your macronutrient, because that keeps insulin the lowest. And I was worried that I'm going to get a heart attack or something, or I'm going to balloon, because they say every gram of fat has far more calories than a gram of carbohydrates, and that's why carbs were really touted to be a better option for us to eat. But I went on this diet anyway. And because I'd been writing about food, I'd been going to farmers markets and restaurants and things like that. Like, I really was connected to the source of my food. My paradigm had shifted from being just a person who went to the shops and got, meat pies and sausage rolls and things like that. I was eating locally and I was eating seasonally, but I was still having a very grain-based diet, because in the bottom of the food pyramid, we were told that we should be eating 8 to 9 serves of whole grains a day, and that's what I was trying to eat. So I dropped that part of the food pyramid from my diet, and I was eating lots more fat, so it flipped upside down. Fat was the main calorie intake. I was eating a lot of vegetables, and I was eating butter and bacon and steak and fish and nuts and seeds and high quality dark chocolate with very little sugar in it. And I really expected that I would balloon in weight based on what the calories were giving me, because sometimes I was eating 3,000-4,000 calories a day, because my body seemed to really crave fat at that point. And so to give you an example, like when I was calorie restricting, sometimes I would eat 0 calories a day, sometimes I would eat 500 a day, and a normal person is like 2,200 and 2,500, depending on their size. But I was eating far more than that. And I got on the scales a week later, and my weight had dropped, and it was really, really so interesting to me to see something like that happening, and it was very encouraging. At one point, my body made a switch from burning sugar to burning fat, relearning that skill that it had to actually burn fat, because it's been dealing with the toxicity of carbs and sugar for a lifetime, that it had forgotten how to do this. And at one point, it made that switch, and it now could do both sugar and fat. And I had access to an incredible amount of energy that was stored within me for the first time. So that gave me a feeling of energy that I had lacked all my life. I got over my fatigue because I was able to access the energy that I had stored for later, rather than to rely on a fleeting source of energy from the food that was in my muscles or from my digestive tract. Yeah?
No, yeah, keep going.
So from there, the weight kept dropping, and just over that year, I lost 22 kilos. I've lost 30 kilos since, and I fluctuate a little bit, 2 or 3 kilos up or down from where I am, but I'm stable around 30 kilos lighter. And what was super interesting to me is the change in mental clarity that I experienced.
Yeah.
I became calmer, happier, more focused. I could think better. I could articulate my words better. And I found a new sense of peace that I hadn't felt before, partially because I was seeing results, but partially because my brain was no longer inflamed. And I had a good look at myself 6 months into it, and to evaluate where I was. And I found out that, hey, I actually haven't needed antibiotics or steroid creams or anything to put on to medicate my skin, which I had been dealing with since I was 17 years old. And since 2011, I've been antibiotic and steroid cream free. So for the first time in my life, really. And I guess that doctor was wrong, that I could do something about it. And I did do something about it. And it worked.
All power to you, Fouad. I just love these stories where people have taken their health into their own hands. That's essentially what you did. You just went, no, I'm not happy with that diagnosis. I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, you know what? Like it was pure luck for me, because my focus was on weight loss. And I came across a whole food diet that actually healed my body.
Yeah.
This was really the power of my discoveries. I didn't think I could heal. I was just trying to lose weight. And all of a sudden, by putting the right things into my body, the body responded in more ways than I expected. And it healed the entire system, not just one symptom.
Yeah. Okay. So let's try and bring some of that information back to the basics. One of the big things that a lot of us are getting our heads around is what that quantity of fat looks like in a day, because we've grown up avoiding fat at all costs.
Yeah.
So now flipping that food pyramid or those guidelines on its head and consuming that much fat, what foods are you eating to get that quantity of fat in a day? What does your plate look like?
Yeah, so my plate changes a lot. So now that I've come to this place where I'm much lighter in weight, I can definitely eat more carbohydrates. I'm not demonizing them. They're definitely helpful, and nature makes food for us, and it's healthy if we are healthy.
Yeah.
So the idea for the listeners out there is to not really get caught up in the view of macronutrients, even though that was my own personal pathway of healing, that I switched to a high-fat diet that healed me. The step one is to recognize that all these diets out there that seem to be conflicting and warring against each other, like veganism, vegetarianism, whole foods, paleo, all that kind of stuff, they're actually all on one side of the argument. And on the other side is the industrialized food system.
Yes.
So we shouldn't be fighting between each other or making these vicious claims against each other. Paleo's gonna kill you or that kind of stuff. No, the big problem that we face as a culture now is industrialized food system, and I say that because as much as people are taking their health into their own hands, the system continues to produce more and more sick people from this side, and we find ourselves the people who are educating all the sick people now back into health. We're exhausted because the system continues to churn out more and more people than we can handle and manage. So there's a much bigger need for education, so that the people on this side of the fence get told before the chronic illness sets in for them.
Yeah.
So what we're saying here is, number one, it's whole foods. It's foods that come from the earth, the least amount of processing possible. Some stuff needs basic types of processing, like leaching or soaking and activating or sprouting before you can consume them safely. Things need some, things like spinach. You shouldn't be eating too much of it raw. You should really be steaming it, and you should look at the ways the ancestors have been preparing this food for a long time. Fat in particular is an interesting topic because we are fat phobic. Even the people who are educated on fat still seem to be afraid of eating too much of it. Yeah. And where I started was I was just having as much fat as I wanted from natural sources. So this meant traditional sources of fat like ghee, butter, olive oil, coconut oil. And there's types of fat which we seem to be whole foods. I don't really know much about them, but things like avocado oil and macadamia oil, I don't really know what the process of extracting those oils are, but if they're cold pressed and unrefined, then should be okay. But then we've got the other types of fats which are really unhealthy for us, and they're the industrialized fats. These come from grains. So soybean, corn, rice bran. If you imagine, say, a pile of rice bran, and if a human being goes out to make oil from it, they would not know how. I don't know about you, but would you know how to?
Yeah.
We don't even know where to begin with this stuff. Yeah. In contrast to that, olives. I come from Lebanon, so I come from a family that's been growing olives for many, many generations, and I've pressed my own olive oil. I get my supply here each year. An olive contains oil naturally. You press enough of them, the oil separates, it rises to the top, and the water from the olive settles on the bottom. Simply collect the oil from the top. It's that simple. Yep. Rice bran has to go through a chemical extraction process, hexane extraction, which is chemical and heat treatment. And that creates a very new type of oil. It's full of polyunsaturated fatty acids, which aren't healthy for us. And these new types of oils and fats should be avoided. So no canola, soybean, corn oil, rice bran, grapeseed, all these are highly processed fats. You want to look at the fats that if I gave you rudimentary equipment, you can produce on your own. Yeah. So the reason I'm saying that is because I want the listener to know that not all fats are up for the for this high fat challenge. you have to be very careful about your source of fat. When it comes to animal fats, the animals need to be healthy themselves. So if you decide and choose to eat animals, which I as an omnivore choose to do, and I will eat animals that are ethically raised. So they've been growing in on pasture. They've had access to fields and sunshine and grubs, and they've been eating the natural diet that they're intended to eat. And because they're healthy, their fat is healthy, and then we can eat that safely. So there's different people will respond differently to fat as well. There's genetic stuff. Some people can't handle as much fat as others, but really most people are okay with fat. The people who can't handle fat are a smaller minority. This kind of stuff you'll start knowing about yourself as your journey progresses. So it's not a big deal for you to obsess about the details now. It's not like you wake up dead tomorrow because you had a bit too much butter. That won't happen. But you start noticing how you feel on, say, butter versus olive oil. Which one makes you feel better? And then you can make your decisions based on that. And also the body changes over time. So
I'm seeing a great new headline: "Death by butter." You know,
that's what they used to tell us. You know?
Yes.
So for me, in terms of the plate, you know, like in the beginning, I used to eat a lot of it. So I used to put a lot of fat with my food. So I would have a steak with almost half the amount of that steak on top of it, butter. And I would fry my carrots in butter and olive oil, and I would put a lot of that in my dressing. As my body healed and regulated, my need to eat actually became less anyway.
Yeah.
I don't need to eat as much.
Yeah.
And I just cook foods that are traditional, and they're not too, you know, I don't worry as much about how much fat or whatever I put in it. I don't put it in there intentionally because I want extra fat. I just cook good food.
Yep.
Whatever that looks like, that's healthy for me. If it's whole foods, I'm happy with it at the moment. But people who want to lose weight or increase their fat intake, I say do it gradually so that your body can learn how to digest it, and then get to the point where you're feeling great. And if you're feeling great, then just listen to your body. If you feel like you need to go back a little bit and add a little bit more, say, more leafy greens cooked in the fat, then do that. If you need more protein, do that. Every human being is different. Like my wife and I are different. She needs things that are different to what I need. So the important thing on the health journey is to know that if you've been eating an industrialized diet, your ability to sense the messages from your body has been muted because of the food and the way that the gut talks to the brain. The gut has been asking for all the wrong stuff. Now it's been trained to ask for sugars and all the things that the body has been addicted to over the years. And then you go through a detox process, and this communication gets recalibrated within you. And at one point, you start noticing that your body tells you what it wants and what it doesn't want. And sometimes it tells you, I don't want any food. I'd like to go hungry for a day. And I'm you know, if you're unwell, sometimes you don't want to eat. I fast quite a lot. I use that really heavily in my set of tools. And that's when my body tells me, hey, like, just no need to eat for now. Just calm it down. I'm good for a while. So I do that. And then it's just important to be attentive to the message.
Yeah. A big part of, I had a big weight loss story as well. And I lost about 17 kilos, but that was going from a vegetarian diet to a meat eating diet and including fat as well. It's a very similar story. But one of the things that was very key in the picture that I learned was having, you know, this protein, meat protein and fat. I ate probably less than half because you just don't need the quantities of food that you do when you rely so much on carbohydrate and, you know, breads and pastas and so on.
Yeah, totally. Like bread and pasta, they hormonally make you want more bread and pasta. and you essentially turn it like almost like a herbivore, like a grazing herbivore that's always needing to eat. Whereas we are far different. A hunter-gatherer would go for days in the wild without eating. Like they have to survive in that way. They can't continue to eat every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And anyone who tells you, yeah, you should just eat often, it's not really true. Maybe for a while you're healing, you need to nourish the body by putting as much nutrition into it as you can. But you got to really know that your body is built to have certain amounts of food, not too much of it, and go through times of lean times as well.
I also love the message that you talked about before, that it was in essence, what's good for the planet is good for us. And when we're looking, that my ability to transition from vegetarian to eating meat was, the reason I was vegetarian was because I was so unhappy with the way that animals are treated. And so now, there's a very, very strong focus on only ethically raised animals that are treated well, fed well, and that's better not just for our health but for the planet.
Yeah, we're part of this ecosystem. We're not outside of it. And we've been eating meat forever. The early humans, they've been eating meat. And we look at things like vegetarianism, and look, I totally agree. Like I actually grieve a lot for the fact that an animal is dying because of the way that we are now, and that all these fields or wilderness has been chopped down for us to plant soybeans and corn and things like that. That really hurts me a lot. I don't differentiate between a field and an animal. To me, they're both as important as each other. And farming practices that are set to feed the world with vegetables are actually killing a lot of animals at the same time. They're not, they're causing so much death of species collapsing and insects dying because of the sprays. And so, but it's the same thing. We're talking about organic farming that looks after the land properly and makes sure that there's a really good ecosystem when it comes to the birds and the bees and the grubs and all that kind of stuff. For that to thrive, it needs animal input as well. So without herbivores in the scene, that the cycle breaks. We need animals in the cycle, and we're part of that cycle too. And to me, I feel one thing is, if you're gonna be a vegetarian, you can do it, but you're gonna have to really work hard at your health, much harder than someone who eats meat. And the person who eats meat also has to struggle with a little bit of that dilemma of the direct death of the animal that they're consuming, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't face that. This is something really important to look at. And we can't just say, oh well, I'm just eating grass-fed animals, so I'm okay. No, this is like there's an exchange of life force here, and that needs to be respected as well. But I think the human being who's disconnected the most is the person who's just been completely put on the other side, like in that place where they no longer know that they belong to the natural world, that they've been eating artificial food, they're drinking domesticated water, they're afraid of the sun, they get shuttled from one place to the other without real involvement in their lives. And this is where I was. And it's really a matter of finding back your own wildness and finding things that resonate with you as an individual. So wherever you're sitting at, whether if you're inclined to be vegetarian or vegan or paleo or whatever it is, of course it's your decision. There's no doubt about it. All these diets are based on the whole food paradigm, and as long as a human being isn't getting disconnected from their animal nature, because this is like, at the end of the day, it's an animal body, and it has a wildness that needs to be respected. If you are disconnecting, that you're going to struggle psychologically. And it's not about reconnecting back to your nature and the greater nature that you correspond with.
Mm, that's beautiful. I love the idea of becoming more connected with our food. I think we've, part of this crazy busyness of life that we're all trying to manage is, has part of that is a disconnection from our food, whether we no longer actually sit at the table to eat as a family, whether everything just comes out of a tin in a packet and it's instant, or gets something that just gets put in the microwave and it's instant. And I know I was listening to this, my sister talking about a friend of hers who she didn't want to tell her children where meat came from. It was just something that came from the supermarket, not that it was because she didn't want to distress them. And I understand all those things. It's not a criticism, but I think that disconnection from food is, it's somewhere, it's probably a starting point, Fouad. Yeah.
Yeah, I see it too. Yeah, and it is we're in a culture that is afraid of death anyway, so we don't even look at that for ourselves. It's you know, you can't avoid that. Maybe you can avoid taxes, but you can't avoid death. So that's yeah. I think this needs a really good look. Like I spend a large part of my time. I do wilderness journeys on my own, and I do solitary journeys, and a big part of it is contemplation of death and what means to be alive and to die and to be part of this cycle on the planet that
Yeah.
has birth and death in it. And these are things that are nourishment to me to look at. They're not macabre or distressing at all. This is it enlivens my life and makes me appreciate things more. And to sort of understand that life and death are two sides of the same coin is a big understanding that a human being can get to. I mean, the ancients have always drawn that symbol of the snake eating its own tail. We've seen it, and this is the symbol of life, like that life eats life. That you can't, and it's all part of the one big thing that continues to happen, and we can't break that cycle. We can't break it, but we can definitely choose a path of less suffering. There's no doubt. But the question is, what is less suffering? Like, we don't even see big pictures anymore because the systems are so complicated. Yeah.
I could get lost in that conversation. Let's with our last little bit of time together, maybe because you are such a fabulous cook and chef, let's look at how we can reconnect a bit with the food that we're eating and getting back in the kitchen. Where are some great places to start if we're just putting together? I guess it's a really big question. How do I narrow it down for you?
No, that's fine. I think firstly, to remember that food or cooking can potentially be a joyful thing. That it doesn't need to be a chore. If you think it's a chore, it's just an attitude that you have towards it, because many different people have different attitudes towards food. Some people love it, some think it's a chore. And if you think it's a chore, then that attitude might accompany you for the rest of your life, and it might make your life hell, because every time you go in the kitchen, you hate what you're doing.
Yep.
Start trying to shift your attitude and to try to enjoy aspects of food, then you'll start seeing a shift in what you can cook, because it reestablishes the connection with the task itself. Simple places to start is the oven, roasting vegetables very simply. Like, I'll tell you what, cutting an onion in half in its skin with a little bit of olive oil on top, quartering a cabbage, olive oil and salt in a tray in the oven, that takes a minute worth of work. And within half an hour or whatever it is that you're baking it for, it comes out and it's done. And you've done like 2 big trays of vegetables. You don't need to peel everything. You don't need to go into carving things or chopping finely. That's for later. Just do the big bulky stuff, like the stuff that you can cook in bulk, very easy. Soups are super easy as well. Like with soups, most people these days have some kind of Thermomix or something like that. You can chop all these veggies up, speed 4 or 5, put it in a big pot, add the water or broth or whatever it is that you want to add in there. You can add root vegetables that you've like cut really chunky and put them in there. That whole thing maybe takes 10 minutes, and got a really big pot of soup that's ready to eat. You can throw in a little bit of meat or chicken or some soaked grains like or legumes like chickpeas, and it becomes just making it simple and not making elaborate things, not baking pastries and cakes and pies. That stuff takes too much time. And that's also on the spectrum of whole foods. That's one step too much anyway. For those of you who are trying to go back to basics, back to basics is think like maybe all you have is a fire to cook on. You're not going to go and make those elaborate things. So just as you keep it simple, your body gets nourished, you start healing, your relationship with food starts healing, your relationship with cooking starts healing, and that whole journey starts accelerating itself. So keeping it simple in the beginning and staying tuned into the potential of finding joy of cooking, that might be a good place to start, I would say.
I like to tell people that I went from, being a very avid recipe follower. I had no confidence in my own cooking. But then when I changed the way I was eating, these flavors don't clash. You can't get it wrong if you're just using the basic ingredients. They don't clash.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Like, good ingredients usually complement each other. That's really what it is, and I think totally you're right. And maybe one thing is to remember that mostly you want to balance, like get the salt right. So don't put too much salt in the beginning. You can add it a little bit later. You can improve the acidity by adding a little bit of lemon juice or something like that. If it needs to be a little bit sweeter, then if you're using like a root vegetable or a pumpkin or something, that might give it sweetness, or you can put a bit of honey in there. Bitter flavors come from herbs, and say like you put some aromatics like kaffir, lime leaf with a bit of coconut, garlic, and ginger, lemon juice, and a bit of broth, and you've got an amazing soup. All these flavors, they really marry up and they enhance each other. So, and it just works. It works. That's why soups work. Otherwise, we'd struggle making soup.
You're making me hungry. When I was having a look through some of your recipes, I saw your impossible cake that you made for a child's birthday. I think, was it?
My daughter's, yeah.
So I've got my son's birthday coming up, and I thought I'd give it a crack, even though we don't need to be
dairy-free, gluten-free,
dairy-free. It's just free. You should have called it the free cake.
Well, a lot of kids will probably come to that birthday party with some kind of food intolerance. So if you have a cake like that, which has, no egg, no dairy, no gluten, no refined sugars, it's just incredible actually that I managed to make a cake that holds together and tastes good and has none of this stuff in it. So I think it's helped a lot of people out there, because a lot of people were stuck as to how they're going to be able to cook something for an occasion when all these intolerances.
Absolutely. So was it a hit?
Look, we've been eating it for years, but I only published it a few months ago, and people love it. So we get lots of tags from people saying, thank you for the impossible cake, and that's been great. It's a life changer for us.
So we've given a lot of focus to the food aspect, which is beautiful. Can we just, in your healing journey, I do always like to kind of bring it back to the idea that food is very foundational. It's a non-negotiable. We need to get back to some of these real food ideas, but there's other pieces of the puzzle in there as well. Can you touch on some of those as well?
Joe and I came up against this very thought just recently in our online gut health program, where someone said, hey, I've got a friend of mine. She's a single mom of 2. She has really vicious eczema. She's on steroid creams, trying to get off them. So she's getting steroid withdrawals, and she has to go to the hospital now because of the steroid withdrawals. What can we tell her to help her with the food stuff? And I've just felt the weight of that woman's life on me. And I thought, there's nothing I can tell her about food right now that she's going to be able to action at all. There needs to be a space in your life before you can make changes for the way that you eat. So we wrote a document which is on our online gut health program. It has tips for food and also tips for lifestyle. And the lifestyle stuff, so what we focus on and what we believe in anyway, is that physical health is only one part of health, and one of the major things that a human being can really aspire to in life is to find inner peace for themselves. Because there's no point in going through all this stuff and being healthy when your mind is still vicious and attacking you all the time, and you're still busy and feeling like you're overwhelmed, you're always late for something, and you're always apologizing because you didn't do this, and life can just get too much. So what we try to talk to people about is, hey, before you start the food journey, if you're overwhelmed, let's look at parts of your life that you could sort of address in order to create the space for healing. So, for instance, one of them is simplifying your life. So let's say you have a lot of after-school commitments for your kids. Some of them are optional. Like if you really need healing, you might drop one of the two things that you're doing for every kid that you have, and that will give you a little bit more space and a little bit more calm, and you're not rushing all the time to get places. And I'm not saying do it forever. I'm saying do it until you're well enough to do it again. Like, drop it until you're well enough to do it again. So that's one aspect. Another thing is detoxing the home. So that's a simple thing. Like, before you start doing anything in terms of the food, you can just get rid of the shampoos and the body washes and the makeup and the perfumes and the air fresheners and the all that stuff that is in the house. Dishwashing liquid and the clothes washing liquid, fabric softeners. All this stuff is loaded with chemicals unless you're buying it from a really good source. And if you're buying it from the supermarket, chances are you're getting toxic stuff in, because they're not really trying to get the best stuff there. They're just trying to get the stuff that's cheap that they can make a big profit margin on. And so go to a good website and buy really high quality body care products and home care products. When you do that, this is no effort compared to buying it from the supermarket. You still, it's not like you're changing your daily habits. You just buy your shampoo once and you get stock up for like 2 months worth of shampoo. You don't have to do it again for another 2 months anyway. So it becomes, it infiltrates in your life. And it's not a daily effort. It's just a one-off effort that then you build a good habit from, and then you're okay. So that's really easy. Decluttering the home is a big deal. So if you're living with clutter, that is reflecting your inner state and causing more clutter in the inner state. So they feed off each other, and it's understandable. We live very, very busy lives, and we're very stretched, and it's very hard for us to put things in their place because we're just going from one place to the other. So one thing is getting rid of all the excess stuff that you don't need in the house, and creating room in the house where things can go and sit, and you can feel a little bit more peace, because you get sensory overload from all the stuff that's lying around the house, and it takes up a lot of your energy from being able to function in a healthy way. At least, the very least, then you can start thinking about going on a health journey, because there's a little bit more space in the house. And there's, of course, things like talking to your family about the importance of the habits that you're trying to put in around eating. This is related to food directly, but it's not a food thing. But you have to get buy-in from the house, or at least acceptance of some sort that this is going to happen. You can't just do it without telling anyone, because they'll start asking for all the stuff and not understand why things have changed. Spending time outdoors is a big deal. Nature really is our home. The houses that we live in are almost separating us from being outdoors, which is a form of nutrition for us. Probably the most important nutrient for us is being in nature. I don't have much time to talk about this, but this is one of the biggest things, because I'll give you an example. Zoo animals that are held in captivity and they're just living their lives in those confined spaces, they they exhibit the exact same symptoms that civilized.
I think we've frozen. All right, we had a little glitch there. Fouad's screen froze, but we're back. We were just talking about the zoo animals.
Yes, so they exhibit the exact same symptoms of civilized people.
Yeah.
Anxiety, depression, chronic illness. These are things they don't encounter in the wild, and neither do wild humans. You know, people who live in tribes and small communities. Tribal people don't have a word for anxiety and depression. They don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
And a large part of that is, of course, being in the natural world. It's more home than anywhere else. Yeah. Another one is choosing your people, the people that you surround yourself with. So we may have accumulated habits of emotional dependency or attracting people who are emotionally dependent on us. And during the time when we're healing, there's no room for that, really. We don't have the energy to solve other people's problems, and we need to find our own strength as well. Definitely find a community that is supportive but doesn't support you in a way that takes away your strength and your ability to make your own decisions. And if there's someone in your life who's constantly trying to leech energy from you in order to get their life in check, which quite often they don't get there at all because they're just living their life in a way that's just emotionally dependent, and they thrive on complaining to people and telling them how their lives are, then that's a person that you might need to pause for a little bit if not press stop on, or change your habits with them so you don't feed that exchange. So there needs to be a revision of the people who are in your community, and maybe an establishing of a new community. Sleep is massive, just a massive part of healing. All the stuff that you do during the day will come to fruition. It'll actually kick in benefit during sleep. So have a sleep routine, turn off technology, no blue light exposure, get sunlight during the day, sleep before you're too tired, don't use your phone up until you're about to pass out. That kind of stuff is super important. The light from the devices will affect your circadian rhythm, which is how your body regulates when it sleeps and when it wakes up and when it heals and when it produces hormones. So there's that. And I think there's two things left, which is one is fostering inner peace. So a lot of us have forgotten that the human being has the capacity to be peaceful within themselves. A lot of us think peace means like sitting on a rock somewhere in the lotus position, or having some kind of robe on, or meditating, or doing mantras or something like that. It has nothing to do with that. Peace is not dependent. Peace and happiness are not dependent on external factors. They're not things that will happen when something is achieved. They're an innate human capacity which we can learn to tap into even in the most difficult times in our lives. And peace is recharging for the nervous system. It makes your body function better. It takes you out of fight or flight, which is this hypersensitized way of being where you're always like stressed and anxious. Now, going back into a peaceful way means that you're in rest and digest. Your body's working to heal itself. So it's very, very important to do that. And then having a success mindset. So feeling that every step that you take is going to be beneficial for you. A lot of people measure their success by where they want to be. And they look at themselves and go, you know what? Like, I had Hashimoto's and I went on the GAPS diet for 6 months. And during that time, I didn't really heal Hashimoto's. That's one woman said to me. So I went back to eating the way that I was eating before. And I said, well, did your symptoms get worse? And she said, yeah, absolutely. They got worse after I went off GAPS. I said, maybe GAPS for a while was halting the progression of the disease for you until you healing can take place slowly. And people don't, because we think in a linear way, we think that, you know, like I'll give you an example. Like I'm where I am today, but if I hadn't made those choices in 2011, I'd be in a different place. Today, I still struggle with some health issues, of course, because of the over medication and all the stuff that I've had to deal with. And if I had the mindset that I still haven't healed and that makes me angry, I'll be in a very bad place. But I look back and I say, man, I was 128 kilos. I was pre-diabetic. I had histamine issues, acne, and eczema. If I hadn't changed my life, I'd probably be gone by now. I don't know where I would be.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thankful for whatever the body is capable of doing, however healing it can facilitate in these few years that I've had to heal. And I don't measure my success by where I want to be, but where I would have been if I hadn't made those changes. And this is a different way that makes you feel that your journey is successful, because otherwise you really would have headed down a very bad direction if you don't make changes.
Yeah. That's perfect. And to wind up this interview, one of my favourite places to start with clients in making some changes to the way they eat and moving into this more whole food way of eating is to look at breakfast first. I often find that's the meal that takes the biggest mind shift out of the cereal box or the toast. Can you share your favourite breakfast, Fouad?
You know what's funny is when I wrote the cookbook, Life Changing Food with Jo, we were talking about breakfast ideas, and she goes, "What do you have for breakfast?" And I said, "Hey, Jo, it's almost ridiculous because I can't put it in the book. It's too simple." She goes, "What is it?" I said, "It's a bacon and cabbage stir fry." She said,
"I love that breakfast. I love it." Yeah.
See, that's the funniest thing is because I thought it was too simple for people to. They're like bacon and cabbage stir fry, and I get so many messages. One of the most popular recipes is bacon and cabbage stir fry. It just makes me laugh so much, but it's so delicious. I tell you what, when you cabbage, when it's boiled, it has this kind of sulfury smell. It's not good, but when you bake it or you fry it, it's so good. It becomes sweet. Really, really delicious. So simple: onions, garlic if you want, cabbage, bacon, you fry it all up, and you know it's so filling. It's got a lot of vegetables in it. It's got good fats which facilitate the absorption of the nutrition that's in the cabbage, and it's so filling. And when you have a protein based and fat based breakfast, you won't reach for that muffin and coffee at 10 o'clock. I love that breakfast. It's right up there. You've just reminded me I haven't had it for a while. So it's back on the list. Do it. It's good. I love it. And also now these days I'm doing a lot of broth with my breakfast. So I make a lot of bone broth and I'm consuming it regularly now with every meal. And I find it very calming for my nervous system. Having broth, there's something about it that just makes you relax, and it produces good hormones and makes you more peaceful for your day.
Very grounding. A lot of people don't realize that that sulfur, that cabbage, it's actually a fantastic detoxification. It's good for your skin, hair, and nails. It's just like this, beauty treatment in breakfast.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way of putting it. I love it. Cabbage as a beauty treatment. Like, you don't put it on your eyes. Thanks, Edwina.
Thank you so much. I have just loved this interview. We covered such a beautiful space. It just feels lovely. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me, and good luck to the listeners out there who are going on their journey. It might seem daunting, but they say the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So guys, just take it easy and do what you can, and don't judge yourselves too harshly. I would imagine it'd be a much easier ride if you just enjoy it.
That's perfect. I know people are going to want to learn more from you, Fouad. Where's the best place for them to look?
So I'm number 2 at quirkycooking.com.au. So Jo is the original Quirky. So you can visit us at quirkycooking.com.au. That's where our website is, where our cookbook is, and we've got an online shop there where we sell really good products. If you want to follow me personally on Instagram, I'm Kassab, so Foo Kassab, Kassab. or on Facebook, I'm Fouad Kassab Health. Yeah, happy to hear from you. Just send us a message if you have any questions. And really, I'm so happy that they're listening and some action is going to be taken for the health. It's so worthwhile. It's just, just do it. It's really worth it. Really worth it.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll have to wind up. We're out of time, but hopefully we'll do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Edwina.
All right, bye.